So this is a list we played last week. Not really felt any reason to change it. You know, it's a 3-3-3-3-3 sideboard and a 4-4-4-4-4-4-4 main deck. You know, it's not really anything special. You have Goblin Guide and Swift Spear for your early pressure. You have Eidolon as obviously one of your better creatures, and then you have 4 of everything else. You know, we're not running any Skull Cracks or anything. You know, as far as Searing Blaze, I would say last week we ran into a lot of decks where Searing Blaze was relevant, so I didn't see any particular reason to bring in Skull Cracks quite yet. You know, 4 of Lightning Helix obviously is something you could debate, but you know, there isn't a ton of aggression in the format, and you know, GG likes to talk about how playing Lightning Helixes in your deck can be detrimental off Ragavan. I kind of think that's a bit of nonsense. I mean, yes, it is unfortunate if your opponent happens to hit a Lightning Helix off your deck, but, you know, I think it's relevant in those matchups where you're racing situations more than whether Ragavan hits one of your 4-ofs in your main deck. Because they're just as likely to hit a land or a Boros Charm as they are a Lightning Helix, so, you know, it's kind of whatever. As far as the sideboard, you know, Path, you know, there was a time I was down to 2 paths, but 3 is definitely relevant, especially as Ledger Shredder gets out of hand fairly quickly. You know, 1 Connive trigger, they can easily be a 2-4, you know, along with Murktides and Death Shadows and all the various other things you would normally want Path for. 3 of Deflecting Palm might be a little much, but, you know, once again, there are a bunch of big creatures out there, so it's kind of whatever. Smash Smithereens, once again, Hammer Time's a thing, so, as well as the affinity decks that pop up now and again. Roiling Vortex, obviously, the matchups it's good in against, whether it's Elementals, the Cascade decks, etc. And then Sanctifier and Vec. While I wasn't in love with this card before we took the break with burn content, you know, this is functional in enough matchups that it's still a pretty reasonable card overall. So, you know, once again, kind of hard to argue off of the 5-0, but we'll see how we feel after running it through a league this week. Alright, we're back for match number 1. It's pretty reasonable overall. We're up against a Yorion deck, so right away might have a more difficult matchup than we had any of the ones last week. So, on this, group our Swizzle Spear gets to at least connect. Alright, so those creatures that effects are being tapped. Oh, okay, that actually sounds pretty sweet. I have no idea what's going on here with our opponent having Dark Slick Shores, Yorion. It must have been holding off in case we had a copy of Eidolon. Definitely an auspicious start for us this game. So effects we can tap. Primarily modern as far as video content, but like I play quite a bit of different things. Yuck. Guess we're pitching the Bloodstained Mire. Primarily play modern as far as video content, but I also play some Pioneer / Explorer, play some Historic and Brawl. Not really been in the standard for some time, although I do dabble in that from time to time. When I was consistently able to do more video content and had Mana Trader subscription, I did Legacy from time to time. But there just hasn't been, between getting married and some other stuff, there just hasn't been time to do a lot of different things, so. C'est la vie. I have no idea if our opponent runs counter spells on top of everything else. Feels like if they're countering anything, they would have countered that, so. The Ultimate Liliana, what are we going to do? I presume our opponent will do like basic mountain. Choose this pile to sacrifice. Gotta love the random Liliana-ness. Amulet's a really difficult deck to kind of get a handle on. There's a couple of people that do Amulet content. Francisco being the primary one that I could think of. He only does it, you know, like occasionally, but still. What is in my opponent's hand? Alright, Kodal makes sense, but I figured he would have blocked there. I guess one is not dead, so... Oh, drew a Brazen Borrower. Go to attacks. Get a little bit more information from our opponent's deck. Sure, I'm good with this exchange. Just going to hold on to Bolt. Once again, we don't know if our opponent's playing like any counter spells or anything. You know, if they're playing a light number of counter spells, they might just like hold on to like something like a copy of. Sure. Whatchamacallit until the last minute. So our opponent is playing a Sultai Yorion deck, but really we don't have much to go off of other than that. We saw like Inquisitions, Thoughtseizes, you know, a whole bunch of stuff like that, but we really didn't see a ton of like counter spells. We didn't see a ton of, yeah, that's like online over time. I've played like, especially when I had Mana Traders, I played most of the decks, but my staple has always been Burn since I got back into Magic several years ago. I guess we'll bring in a Vortex. Maybe shave like a couple of Searing Blazes and maybe, I don't know, skewer the Critics on the draw. could shave Riftbolt with bringing in Vortex, but like we really don't know what our opponent is on. Yep, no lander. Cool, cool. Keep 7. This hand's fine. Put back basic mountain. I shouldn't say this hand's fine. This hand's actually functionally fairly good. It's like one of our better starts. Yeah, I've probably played quite a few versions over the years, including some weird stuff. Like, I jokingly played, like, Oko Burn when Oko was in the format, and, like, random stuff like that, so... Like, I typically enjoy Burn, although there have been portions of time where I just look at the deck and go, yeah, you can't win a game worth anything. Before I took kind of my hiatus from playing Magic content, when I set down my Mana Traders account and a whole bunch of other stuff, it was just like... Okay, opponent's got that, which is fine. Then play Eidolon, force them to deal with that. Which obviously they have the answer to, but, you know, they're still taking 2 damage. And they're just casting Liliana. Okay, sure. Just going to ignore the Liliana. Obviously, it's a little bit dangerous to do, but I think it's going to do more harm to our opponent than us because we're already basically hellbent, and I'm not going to waste any damage. Have to be counter burn. So, like a Delver variant of some kind. Prior to Murktide, anyway. Each player discards a card. Sure. Opponent is playing an interesting pile. I still wouldn't be surprised if they have some amount of counter spells post board, but I'm going to let this happen first. That way, if my opponent happens to have Spell Pierce here, I can play around that. I'm not going to be able to... I was going to say, I'm not going to play around Flusterstorm, but if they happen to have, like, Spell Pierce, I would have been able to play around it. And I also didn't want to run our Boros Charm into... I cannot remember the name of the card off the top of my head. It's the counterspell that often saw play in the... That is a terrifying card. Alright, Vortex isn't terrible here, if it resolves. They have to counter this, right? Yeah, Drown Lock was the card I couldn't think of, so... Weird modern cards for 100, Alex? So I can see it there because they were going to swing for 9, or for 6, and them going to 9 at that point pretty much is just like game over. I mean, yeah, I suppose we could draw them like a way to kill it and then gotten back into the game, but already being hellbent, that's just a bad place for a burn deck to be. This hand is a risky one because of the one lander specifically, but I think it's got enough upside that we try it. I think the trash truck must be here. If we draw a second land, obviously this hand is nigh unbeatable, but... Interesting build. Well, I mean... really don't want to be drawing one-drop creatures here, but we know our opponent will have a black sorcerer if they want one. Okay, so Codal maybe? Come on, deck, cough up a land. Trigger. Just go ahead and jump blocking to life. Opponent is playing such a weird deck. That is quite good for us. So what's more damage wasted? Killing my own Goblin Guide or going face on my opponent? I think I just attack and let them block. Bolt face, eat her own Goblin Guide, and then suspend Rift Bolt. I feel like that's the move here. Puts our opponent to 6. Suspend Rift Bolt. Or at the very least, our opponent has Fatal Push here. Yeah, Drown Lock was the card that I couldn't think of before they cast it last game, so... Alright. Force them to deal with creatures. Sure. Vulture face. Opponent has conceded the game and lost connection. Nice. Alright. back for match 2. Hand is pretty reasonable. You know, 1 drop into spells is usually pretty good. Against Emperor Opie. Plays Pluto Delta, Shock, Thoughtseize. Nope. Interesting. I was gonna say, so what do we do first? Guess we don't really have a way to kill a creature on 1, so we're just gonna attack. One's gonna Thoughtseize us next turn, and it's gonna be absolutely gorgeous when they take our Searing Blaze. Oh boy. Opponent's going to 13. Depends on what they hit off of this. They're not gonna have Delirium this turn. Best card, I was gonna say, the best card here to take would be Searing Blaze, obviously. Go ahead and do the thing. Well, it goes to 6. Okay, sure. Suspect our opponent is sitting back on Drowning Lock, which would turn their guys into 3/3s. And there's no profitable attack there. So you like the card on top, whatever it is. Yeah, I would presume Aquarius, that's a similar variant to the old mono blue Phoenix list, or mono red Phoenix lists. One's got a Ragadan. Okay, we're gonna get hit for 6. They could easily have another Drowning Lock here, which would be my guess. If they're smart, they'll counter this spell. Do you have 2 counter spells here? Get a little bit of information about our opponent's deck. Apparently they just like all the cards on top of their deck. Play around some nonsense. Alright, and our opponent concedes. So we want the Sanctifiers and the Paths. Deflecting Palm would be a maybe. Boros Burn tends to be my go-to out against creature-based decks, although they're Death Shadow most likely, so, you know. Couple Eidolons on the draw, since you know it's a little bit harder if they get ahead on the board to justify an Eidolon. Vortex, it could have Brutality and such, but I don't know if that's really the game we want to be playing. Deflecting Palm is more if we for sure know they're on Shadow, then it becomes a good bit more attractive, but once again, it's really hard to leverage Deflecting Palm against a deck with Thoughtseize, potentially Inquisition, plus some number of counter spells. And this is a 5-laner we just can't keep. This hand is interesting. Question is, what do we put back? I think we keep and put back Fiery Islet. Obviously, the danger of this hand is turn 1 Ragavan. Yeah, turn 1 Monkey is like the biggest concern with this hand. We have to fetch here because we can't afford our opponent to hit our other Sacred Foundry. So it's just kind of whatever here. They hit a Bolt, which I'm perfectly fine if they choose to cast. The downside here is if they have Drown in the Lock, they get to get our Sanctifier, but they're going to have a hard time getting this off the board, so... Kroxa is annoying here. I actually think we pitch Eidolon. Blaze is a good card. Do I attack with Sanctifier and risk them hitting something with Ragavan? Sure. If they want to waste some mana dashing, I think we're perfectly fine with that outcome. Opponent with nothing. Alrighty then. Could have played Goblin Guide here, but I'm going to actually leave it back on defense. Seems a little bit weird, but once again, I don't really want to get cranked by a monkey stealing a path off of our deck and killing our Sanctifier. And, yeah, would have died anyway, so... Opponent's expressively iterated. Should probably have Lightning Helix in response to that. 2 cards enter the Exile Zone. Go ahead and Helix them in response while they can't do anything. Alright, and our opponent concedes. Nice. I will be... Alright, back for match number 3. On play against Mindset 905. So they're a Yorion deck as well. This hand is, I guess, acceptable against a Yorion deck. After whatever we played against earlier, I don't know if there's any, like, set Yorion decks right now. And our opponent is not passing, so I would not be surprised if this gets solituded. Outside of, like, pitch elementals, I don't understand why people just, like, let their clock run down turn 1 when they clearly can't play anything. So... and we're up against Grief. So, another weird deck. Okay, Blooming Marsh. Am I about to get, like... pitch Grief, Undying Evil nonsense? Marsh Flats. Do you have a Fatal Push? You do not. Okay, are you Sultai or are you... We still have no idea. Cool. We were just damned. As much as I would love to hold up Searing Blaze, I don't really think I want to risk not using my mana here, so... Because once again, we don't know really what's going on with our opponent's deck. Okay, Goblin Guy's not a terrible one here. Witherbloom Command. Those 3 cards. Target creature gets -3/-1, or... Okay, sure. Don't know that really does much here. Destroy target non-creature, land permanent. Alright, so I guess they're gonna gain 2 life and... kill our... Wait, what? Maybe they have some on their way to kill our Goblin God? Okay, my opponent's play makes no sense. Like, I understand wanting to hit your land drops, but I really think they would have been better off killing the Goblin God if they didn't have a Fatal Push in hand. Especially since they know we're chilling on Searing Blaze. Okay, so they are Abzan. Opponent gets to persist back a grief. So we're going to lose our copy of Lightning Helix here, but I think doing this, opponent gets our Lightning Helix. Do another Witherbloom command? Apparently not. Okay, we hit nothing, unfortunately. Opponent is a weird, weird deck. Okay, they go to 1. Sure, you have a chump blocker for this turn. Put Yorion in hand. Alright. So Abzan, whatever. Sanctifier seems okay. Roiling Vortex seems alright. So they have like Persist, probably have Solitude. It's really kind of hard to get a read on what all our opponent has access to. Once again, Boros Charms probably come out here. Maybe go down a couple copies of Rift Bolt because we're bringing in these, and our opponent might be able to counter-race us with something. Could go down a couple copies of Eidolon alternatively, which I think we'll do, at least on the draw. Honestly, it's just not good enough in the format. There's a lot of cards that have just been, like, supplanted in the format. Like, Siege Rhino isn't even powerful enough to see play in Pioneer, and Pioneer is a lot lower powered format than Modern. Although, there was a running gag for a while. Fluffy Wolf, who's a streamer that does a lot of Mono Red Prison, was like deliberately putting in a Siege Rhino in. Am I about to get Grief Ephemerated? I'm about to get Grief Ephemerated. Okay. I don't like wasting resources like this, but I really don't want our opponent to get steal another card from our hand. The really nice thing about things like that is that our opponent like wastes a ton of resources to do it. And they have Inquisition, sure. So goodbye Rift Bolt. I'll take a Swift Spear. Interesting. Okay, Thoughtseize Bug. Unfortunately, I don't have the card thing set up. But basically, it's a 4/5 for 1 in each of the Abzan colors. Each opponent loses 3 life, you gain 3 life for a 4/5 with Trample. Card I played a lot in Standard when Cons of Takira was legal. Question is, do I just go ahead and cast this here? I mean, I could like our opponent has nothing to back up their ridiculous start. Well, Tarmogoyf's a pretty good card to back up their ridiculous start. Okay. Draw a card. Play out Goblin Guide. Pass turn. No reason to attack another Tarmogoyf, just to get like 3 points of damage in. So once again, our opponent's constrained on mana, plus they don't have many cards in hand, so. And that's a Magical the Gathering card, I suppose. And even if they Boseiju this, I'm not like terrible, because I get to go grab a mountain and then crack this. Okay, opponent with another Tarmogoyf. Crack this, draw Lightning Helix and pass. Do we have lethal if we swing here? Block, block. Yeah, I think we just have lethal if they... Okay, turn off auto yields. Attack all. Okay. Block. Block. Solitude, you got me. Yeah, it was a card that definitely just saw a lot of play, and even for a little while in Modern, it saw play. And there's a Abzan streamer, I think it's K Diamond or something, that he'll occasionally bust out a Siege round, and like all he plays is Abzan decks. But he, all right, we're back for match number 4 on the play, which is always nice. 4-lander, yeah, we can't do this. Mulligan. Ugh. Well, this is a hand of Magic the Gathering cards. Don't really think we can afford to go to 5. So the question becomes, am I putting back Eidolon or am I putting back Blaze? I think the way our hand's set up, we're putting back Eidolon because we're just going to be taking so much damage from our land here. Pluto Delta. Man, that has been the land of the night, has it not? Okay, we're up against Murktide. So they pitch Pluto Delta. Okay, sure. I have a feeling this Goblin guy is just dying. Yep, definitely Murktide. Gets to see if we're drawing a land. And they shock in and cast a monkey. So if we draw a land, I think we want to go ahead and blaze the and we don't. So maybe I should have gone after the monkey here. Probably just going to lose because we don't draw a second land. They draw a Searing Blaze off top of our deck, which does absolutely nothing other than get it out of the way for us, so that was nice of them. And bolt our face? Apparently not. Put it with 3 card types. If a creature dies, they'll have the 4th card type. So we're in this really awkward situation. And we draw Swift Spear. So what is our realistic path to victory? Three, 4. We're probably taking 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 next turn. So I can try to play Swift Spear to block Monkey. Obviously, I can't beat Counterspell here. So it's, do I play Swift Spear to try to buy us extra turns, knowing that our opponent's Ledger Shredder is going to get to connive, and probably turn on DRC. Yeah, just not hitting a second land is going to kill us this game. But I think my better Because I can put them to 7, but I would need to draw like 2 lands to be able to kill them next turn. And that's just obviously not possible, so I think we play Swiftspear here and hope to block Ragavan. Though, admittedly unlikely. Sure. Okay. I mean, I understand why they did it, but it still seems a little... So I can see it there because there's no set of draws that allow us to win before we're dead. Because we're taking 5, 7, and then this is continuing to tick down on us. That said, our opponent may not know our Boros Burn. Most likely they will, but there is a possibility with the way our lands were set up, they might think we're some type of weird Izzet deck. But most likely they'll put us on burn. I don't really like Deflecting Palm in this matchup. I mean, it's fine, but I feel we already have already too many cards to bring in. A lot of people like to shave Lightning Helix against Ragavan. I'm not part of that camp. I think we shave 2 copies of Skewer the Critics. Just go like this. Sanctifier shuts down all of their red creatures for the most part if it resolves. This hand's okay, not super spectacular. I really don't like Double Path in their opener, but I think the rest of the hand's functional enough that we go ahead and keep it. But downside of I think we just go ahead and hold the fetch land. That way if they want to try to dash a monkey, it just dies. I think we go ahead and Helix them. Like, I don't particularly care if they like Spell Pierce here. Didn't want to really give them a chance to connive there. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, Burn can be, ironically, a difficult deck to sideboard with sometimes. Everybody has different opinions. But this just feels like a losing position from the Burn side. These are the kind of games that the Murktide player often just runs away with and wins. We'll counterspell here, which is fine. I'll go ahead and path again. Problem is, we have no cards in hand, and our opponent's a card selection deck, so... Like, even if they don't have... Yep, of course they have, like, Monkey here, so... Yep, and they draw Lightning Helix, which, you know, is something people talk about. This is why you don't have Lightning Helix in your deck against, you know, their deck, blah, blah, blah. But the reality is, you know, we're losing this game anyway, because... You know, our opponent answered our Swift Spear, and we just drew... We arguably drew too many sideboard cards, and our opponent still has, you know, threats on top of threats. You know, we dealt like with Murktide, Ledger Shredder, and they're still, you know, kind of snowballing here. Overall, I do think this matchup's pretty favorable, or pretty reasonable for Burn, but, like, you know, situations like this where you're just like... Once Burn's out of resources, especially with Lurrus gone. Yeah, that was all 3 paths we brought in the last god. But, you know, we used them all, but this is where it, like, Burn's struggles in the format kind of come up. Just going to take this hit. Cast the Murktide, probably has a counterspell here. Really don't like main phasing bolting their creatures. Presume they'll use a counterspell here. Or not. So I guess we'll go ahead and kill both their threats. Okay, sure. You know, once Murktide gets into this position, it's really kind of hard to come back. I mean, granted, they've drawn a lot of lands, but... I'd be surprised if this just dies. Fiery Outlet, okay. And... I guess we'll continue playing the game, but... pretty sure we're toast here. We need to hit, like, Searing Blaze into gas from there. Okay, so we just are dead. Okay, cool. Well, I didn't want to jinx it, so I didn't mention it while it was still going on, but we were on an 8-match winning streak there with Burn since coming back, so... You know, didn't want to jinx it, so I didn't mention it. But, you know, sometimes you draw poorly in a difficult matchup and you lose, so... I vaguely recall playing against this opponent. That's a good place to be. What deck do you play? Sounds pretty good. I'm going to say, if you tell me what deck you play, I can probably tell you how to beat Burn. Unless it's... Well, even Tron, I can tell you how to beat Burn. Oh, Burnmere. Okay, sure. Seems appropriate. Play Jund piles. Do you play mostly Saga versions, or do you play mostly the new Charm piles? Because I know historically Jund's had a close to rough matchup with Burn. Okay. Opponent is stuck on one land. I don't think I actually attack here. So key cards in the matchup from your side are Game 1. Do you play Liliana? That's the first question is, do you play Liliana? But beyond that, your key card Game 1 is... Key cards Game 1 are generally Inquisition, Tarmogoyf kind of things. And then post-board games, important cards are Collective Brutality, Witherbloom Command, your best bet is to have like modal cards that can be useful in multiple situations. So like Witherbloom Command that we saw earlier out of one of our opponents, etc. are all reasonable cards, but your key card generally is Tarmogoyf. Scavenging Ooze can be decent in a mid-range, like if you can get the game to go a little bit longer. Collective Brutality out of the sideboard's generally pretty good. Trying to think of other cards. Weather the Storm is like a 1 or 2 of, can really swing the matchup. But like your key cards are like main deck or Inquisition, Tarmogoyf, being careful with your fetching, as try to take as little damage from your lands as possible, and then, obviously you have most of Burn's creatures covered, so it's a matter of having like incidental life gain that keeps you alive long enough to close out the game with, if you play like Ragavan, if you play Tarmogoyf, Tireless Tracker, any of those things. The key to beating Burn is pressure plus disruption, and with Jund's Painful Mana Base, you want a little bit of life gain. So like I said, Brutality, Weather the Storm, Witherbloom Command, just cards that allow you to gain a little bit of life while also dealing with Burn's other resources, because you want to get Burn down to no resources and then find a way to close out the game before they can burn you out off the top, is basically your game plan. And then with obviously the new Charm, you have a little bit of card selection or card advantage. That's kind of how you want to approach the matchup. I don't know if that really explains anything new to you, but that's really how the Jund decks usually beat Burn. Tarmogoyf is really the key creature, because it's one of the few cards that Burn struggles to kill in that matchup, at least initially. So we're in a Burn Mirror. I really don't like Sanctifier and back in the Burn Mirror. It isn't good. It doesn't gain life, so it's kind of Like, I'm thinking about bringing a couple paths in case our opponent is like Encore Firewalker. Deflecting Palm is another card that I can bring in here, because I don't like Eidolon on the draw, especially in the Burn Mirror. Probably go down a copy of Skewer the Critics and just kind of roll like this. Deflecting Palm obviously is just a two-way. Yeah, we can't keep his hand in the mirror match, so yeah, we have Lightning Helix, but we only have one land. Wow. Okay, I guess we keep this one, but it's not most exciting. Another one-lander. Opponent suspends, Riftbolt, and passes. Okay, I will just play my land and pass, because we really need a second land. Okay, so they do have Sanctifier, which is not terribly surprising. Alright, play a Swizzle Spear, pass turn. Opponent's got an Eidolon, no Blaze. Alright, so we're probably losing this game. Well, it's a whole lot less interesting when we're stuck on one land. So the mirror match is fun, but it's a lot more fun when people actually play Magic, and neither one of these games have been a game of Magic so far. They've been stuck on one land, I've been stuck on one land. The other player wins. But yeah, you're generally better off in the Jund matchup with anything that is cheap interaction that doesn't cause you life. Even Thoughtseize can be worth keeping in if you catch, you know, an Eidolon, a Boros Charm. You know, a lot of people question about leaving in Thoughtseize, and if you don't have enough cards to bring in, Thoughtseize can be a fine one to leave in. It's not great, but sure, we'll play a Goblin Guide, maybe get a little bit of an idea of what our opponent's got going on. Sacred Foundry really doesn't tell us a whole lot. Yep. Okay, opponent actually seems to be close to out of resources. Not that it particularly matters here, but especially since we're at 5. Yeah. Okay, just bolt the Swift Spear. Hit them. Okay, I just continue to... They continue to rip lands off our Goblin Guide, and I think that's just going to be game. Alright, so our opponent has Sanctifier instead of Core Firewalker. I actually don't know that I want Path in against that. It's like I really hate Path in the mirror, unless it's Firewalker. The reason the Firewalker, like, obviously Sanctifier blanks creatures, and I understand that. But, like... Lightning Bolt giveth, Lightning Bolt taketh away. This is the way. Indeed. But I really don't like Path against Sanctifier. Like, yeah, it blanks creatures and stuff, but it doesn't gain life. And that is why Firewalker is such a house in the mirror, is it really... I think we'll go like that. This hand is it's a hand. Burn Plane can be suspect in the mirror match. Creatures are usually more valuable, and while I would want to mulligan a hand towards a creature, this hand does have Lightning Helix and Bolt, so like if they go turn 1 Idiot here, do I Bolt it? I think I'm just going to go ahead and Bolt this. We draw Goblin God, which is not a terrible time to draw it, I suppose. Really don't want to take a ton of damage here. One's drawing an Arid Mesa. Pretty sure my okay, interesting. 2 creatures is rather terrifying. We draw Searing Blaze. This is the way. Let's go ahead and kill this. Don't draw the Sanctifier in Vec. If they play that, we'll cost them at least 2, probably 3 life. So I'm actually thrilled if they play that. If that makes any sense. You can try. I don't remember if posts are enabled or not, so. But yeah, if you want to, you're perfectly fine to do so. Okay, is my opponent going to cast a Lightning Helix here? Probably not. Opponent going to 6 here. Nope, casting Bolt. Okay, and we're going to take the opportunity to go ahead and Helix their face while they can't Skullcrack us. Hey Gladiator, thanks for the follow. Let's see, Mono Black Pain Train. Okay, yeah, this is the deck you were talking about earlier. Seems like a pretty sweet, different take on things. So what do our take for our opponent to kill us here? Swiss Spear, sure. Cast that. Alright, so that's... I did this in case our opponent had access to... Lightning Helix. I didn't just want to randomly get got by Lightning Helix when we're actually pretty far ahead. But, you know... If our opponent tapped it to cast a spell, they're going to 3, and then they die to Lightning Helix. If they cast Lightning Helix, which is Boros Charm in response, and then them not attacking with Swiss Spear kind of shows a little bit of weakness, especially since we know one of their cards in hand was a Sanctifier that they didn't cast. But like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Sanctifier in the mirror. It's very good in a lot of matchups, especially with the resurgence of Death Shadow. It's reasonable against Murktide. It's decent against some of the Reanimator variants, but I'm not like a huge fan of this card. It's not at its highest peak like when Luris was a thing. Sanctifier was like an auto-include. But yeah, I already had Deflecting Palm in the deck. If you look at the cards that are in my sideboard currently, I had all 3 Deflecting Palms in. I had 2 Eidolons out, or 2 of the Deflecting Palms I guess I had in. So, but yeah, I mean, it's really hard to argue with a 4-1 finish after a 5-0 finish 2 weeks in a row. So, you know, it's kind of hard to downplay this build. But once again, you know, I really, and this is going to sound really harsh, but Sunday nights are kind of like, Sunday nights and like late nights are not like the grinder period. You know, because Sunday nights, you know, you've had all the weekend events and stuff, and everybody's played all their decks and such. You know, so most people that play like the try-hard decks generally aren't on the evenings and the late nights, because like especially the US try-hards. So you're more running into like people trying brews and like different random. It's almost like the old casual, or not the I don't want to call them casual. I think they were called casual leagues. I don't remember. There used to be 2 tiers of modern. There used to be 2 tiers of leagues on Magic Online before they squished them, and like the lower tier, you'd run into like more experimental brews that people would try before like trying the competitive leagues, and you like run into more like reasonable decks and stuff that Burn was pretty good against. Like Burn is reasonable against a lot of the top decks. Like it's decent against Murktide, it's decent against 4-color. Rhinos feels a little rough, although it is a winnable matchup. Living In, Burn's pretty good against. Amulet Titan, if they have Radiant Fountain in the main deck especially, is a abysmal matchup. Tron, which isn't a top tier deck anymore, but Burn's been historically pretty good against. Like one of the things with Burn is it's no longer a top tier deck. It's just not. It has situations where it's good because, well, you know, Burn's a unique strategy in terms of what it does. You know, there aren't too many decks that play creatures plus a bunch of burn spells, so it attacks on 2 different axes. The problem with Burn overall in the meta has been outside, since Modern Horizons 2, it hasn't gotten anything that has improved the deck. The only card of note that it's gotten in the last couple of years is Sanctifier and Vec, which obviously helps some matchups. And then it gained Flame Rift, which, you know, is good for like a mono red variant, but it just doesn't fit into what Boros is doing. You know, we didn't get Price of Progress, we didn't get Fire Blast, we didn't get even Chain Lightning. You know, cards that would have been upgrades to what already exists in the current. Thanks for the follow, Matt Kiwi. But we didn't get any like upgrades to, you know, compete with a lot of the firepower. So Burn's one of those. You know, when we had Luris, we could play a little bit of a long game, but still, the longer a game went against a lot of the top tier decks, the worse Burn's position got. So you really have to mulligan to hands that are going to end the game quickly. You can't really rely anymore on kind of like going to a turn like 6, 7, 8 and like trying to burn your opponent out off the top. You really have to try to end the game in Modern anymore by turn 4 or turn 5, or you're just in this position where you know, Burn kind of loses percentage points as the game goes along, which didn't used to be the case. You know, there's still some matchups like, you know, the Mirror Match, Death Shadow variants, even Murktide to a certain degree. If you like get them to a low point and then like you have this weird staring game with like counter spells and burn spells, the Burn obviously can still win a long game, but you need to like get them down early and, you know, like hold a couple cards in your hand even if they're lands. Just force your opponent to play like their life is on the line every turn. Hope they make a mistake, win the game that way. You know, one of the things with the newer variants of Murktide, they have access to Ledger Shredder, you know, in addition to Murktide, DRC, and Ragavan. You know, that has made the matchup a little bit worse because Ledger Shredder 1 can eye trigger and it gets out of the range of all of our burn spells. And you have to rely on Path to Exile, which used to be exclusively for Murktide. And you really don't want to be bringing in Path against a lot of creature deck matchups. But sometimes you have to because, well, otherwise you just die to a 7/7 Murktide on turn 3. But overall, decks felt pretty good. But once again, we've played against a lot of random opponents' tryhard piles, and Burn historically has done well against 3-color tryhard piles, and it really struggles against the top tier stuff. You know, Amulet, 4-color if you get a good Omnath draw. So I still don't change my position on where Burn is in the meta, but that's not to say you can't do well with Burn in stretches. So, anywho, I want to thank everybody for hanging out. Just a couple programming notes.